Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Gate 25 or Gene Key 25, and we're transiting this from March 20th to March 24th, 2023. So Gate 25 is in the G center and it connects to the Will center via Gate 51. It's in the centering circuit, which is all about empowering people to love themselves, starting with you. We're in the astrological sign of Pisces during this transit, or the gate is associated with Pisces. And the name of this gate is the Spirit of Self, or simply Spirit. And in the I Ching, this hexagram is known as Innocence. So this gate is all about having the energy to unconditionally love yourself and others. So remember, the G center is all about self-love and self-direction. Okay, so it's unconditionally loving yourself and then teaching that to others. So the connection to spirit actually promotes our connection to self and unconditional love. And so this transit's really calling us to learn how to connect to source as a way of creating well-being. So what happens in our world on the shadow side of this is there's fear and mistrust of source, right? Or of spirit or of God, whatever it is that feels like the right word for you, just based on all of the different teachings in the world. So a lot of our at least Western world has cut off from the idea of connection with source or with spirit, and that has resulted in using our life for personal gain. We're disconnected, we're no longer part of the whole, we are just one all by ourselves, so we have to work really hard for ourselves and for our families, and that's it. And this is kind of what we know as the ego, right? In our world, the idea of the shadow side of the ego, that we're just working hard for ourselves and no one else matters. And at the core of that, just because of the level of disconnection that has happened over time in our world, there's this not feeling worthy of being loved by source, right? Not feeling worthy of being a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so during this transit, you're being called to connect with source as the path of creating well-being in your life. And this leads us to the gene key name, from fear to love. And that is truly the ultimate path that we're here to walk as human beings in these lifetimes, in these bodies, on this planet at this time. So the shadow of this is constriction. And I want you to think of constriction first as in regards to your breath. So think of when you're breathing and your breathing feels tight, right? It's tight and compressed. And this is that level of constriction in your breathing is actually closely related to trauma. Because when our breath becomes shallow and constricted, we trigger the nervous system to go into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawning state. And in that moment, we're disconnected from source. We're disconnected from our breath. Think of the word breath. Think of the word to respire. Root is inspiration. To inspire, the root of that is spirit, right? Our breath is our direct connection to source. If we're disconnected to our breath through constriction in our body, we're disconnecting from source. So through that constriction, we have what Richard Rudd so beautifully calls the sacred wound, right? We are wounded on a collective level of being disconnected from source, especially in our Western world, right? And so when we think of the word wound, we think of pain, right? Sore, something painful. I want you to also think of the word wound as something that that is wrapped around, so wound, right? Wind, when we wind something up. So the more we wind something up, the tighter it gets, right? If we're turning something, like I'm imagining I'm tightening something, right? When we tighten it, we constrict it, the tighter it gets. But when we unwind it, when we turn it the other way, it loosens. So this is kind of the spiral path to self-love and to healing our greatest wounds. We need to turn towards them. We need to turn towards our wounds, because in the constriction, this is where love is absent. When we turn away from our greatest pain, when we turn away from our wounds, we take our love away. And this is part of what has happened on a collective level in a trauma sense, right? Trauma is where we've had to disconnect from an aspect of ourselves, especially to maintain love or safety, especially as children. And so when we are constricted or traumatized, we have moved away from love, or we've abandoned ourselves to try to maintain some sort of semblance of love for survival. So we have constriction plays out in this third dimensional reality everywhere. It starts with fences, laws, territory, borders, passports, money, and time. Everything is in this constricted kind of linear box. But then if we think about it as well, we're also constricted by our bodies, right? This skin keeps me constricted in this physical experience. And probably if you're watching this video, you have a sense of being a higher frequency being living in the third dimensional physicality. And sometimes this can feel very constricting and very hard to be in these bodies when you have a sense that something else exists, but because we're in these bodies, that can feel fleeting at times. And so this shadow of constriction can play out in one of two ways. It can play out by this unwillingness or inability to turn towards that which has caused you pain, to look at your pain, to look at what hurts. Or it can happen by, instead of turning away and stuffing it down, we kind of do the opposite, where we project our pain out onto other people. We blame other people. We make other people the bad guys. And all of us do both of these. I know I have, right? All of us do both of these different pieces. So the gift, to move from constriction to the gift of acceptance, we need to turn towards it, to walk into the constriction. And this can be challenging because our whole world tells us not to do this, at least until recently. I'm seeing it more and more where the messaging comes out to look at your pain, to feel your pain, to love your pain. But I want you to think of these mottos that have been in our existence for about 100 years. Keep calm, carry on. Got to have a stiff upper lip, right? Ignorance is bliss. Big boys don't cry, right? All of these types of things. Some of my family mottos are suffer in silence, right? So it's challenging when that's the messaging that we're born into. And this is the beauty of evolution. Evolution happens under pressure, right? Under a form of constriction. We need the pressure in order to stimulate evolution. And so to move towards the gift of acceptance, we need to turn towards this. We need to turn towards that pain. We need to love ourselves in the middle of that place. And it's about looking fear in the face. It's about getting really brave and going, this scares the crap out of me and I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to look at this thing that I haven't looked at. It might be something you haven't looked at for generations, and you're the one in your family that's turning towards the pain, family pain, and looking at it. And we do this because it's about loving ourselves as a way to connection with Source. If we have disconnected from our connection to Source through constriction, we need to turn towards ourselves and love ourselves in order to reconnect. And this really comes down to taking care of your body, right? The G center is all about love and direction, your own body. And so you need to nurture your nervous system, and you need to create time to reconnect to the divine inside of you. So in order to nurture your nervous system, the best way that I like to do it is through breath. So our breath, our lungs, is the greatest hack that Spirit gave us to work with our nervous systems, right? We can actually control our breath fairly easily. So if you want to breathe in for a count of 2 and breathe out for a count of 4, or breathe in for a count of 3 and then out for a count of 6. You want it to be a 1-to-2 ratio. And the reason for this is that when we breathe out, our diaphragm actually moves up. It kind of goes up like this, and your heart is here. And so when your diaphragm moves up as you're exhaling and your heart is here, the diaphragm almost hugs the heart. And think about that. Your diaphragm is hugging your heart. Think of how good it feels when someone you really care about gives you a nice big hug. It's very calming. And so this is what that double exhale does to the heart. It calms the heart down. Now, when the heart is calmed down, the mind then calms down eventually. Sometimes you need to work a little bit on the breath in order before the mind calms down, but eventually the mind will calm. So breathing, number 1. So do 10 breaths like this, I encourage you, where you breathe in for a count of 2 or 3 or 4 and out for double. So if you're inhaling for 2, you exhale for 4. You're inhaling for 3, you exhale for 6, inhale for 4, exhale for 8. And do that 10 times. And while you're doing it, soften your jaw, allow your jaw to soften, and exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. And then creating time to connect to the divine. I like to do this best through play. And it can be play through meditation or dance, anything that brings you joy, anything that lights you up, anything that makes you feel like a kid, whether that's cooking something in the kitchen or watching your favorite movie or doing intuitive movement or putting on your favorite old song or going through a walk in the woods. Do something that helps you, or do something that brings you joy, to reconnect to the divinity within. And when we find that acceptance inside, when we find that ability to turn towards ourselves, to move towards the pain, to move through the pain, we then cultivate more acceptance for others. We cultivate more acceptance in our world. We're not as reactionary, and we're not coming from a place where we feel like we need to fight for our lives, and we're connected to Spirit in order to maintain well-being for self and other. And if you're one of those people who finds it easier to find acceptance in others, then I'm going to leave you with this. Ask yourself if whatever you're struggling with, if that was someone else, your child, your best friend, your partner, your colleague, whoever it is, that struggle was outside of me and someone was sharing that with me, what would I say to them? And then say it to yourself, because it's in you to do that. Okay. So I really hope that helped. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.